I didn't realize how far things had gone until the morning my debit card declined over a $3 coffee. I stood there in my bakery uniform, flour on my sleeves, with a line of customers behind me, and the barista giving that soft, "it happens" smile. But it didn't just happen. Not to someone who had worked every shift she could get. Not to someone who handed over every paycheck for the good of the household. Something was wrong, and deep down, I already knew what. Life with Mark wasn't dramatic in the beginning. We moved into a small rental house on the edge of town, beige walls, weak air conditioning, and a yard he swore he'd fix up when things settled. I worked mornings at a supermarket bakery, and he did landscaping. Hard jobs, long days, nothing fancy. Every night, we'd eat cheap takeout at our wobbly kitchen table and talk about how things would get easier once we got organized. Organized was his favorite word. When he suggested we combine finances, it sounded almost responsible. "Two accounts is messy," he said, tapping my phone as he sat beside me. "Let me handle the bills. You won't have to stress anymore." I'd never been great with money, and he made it sound like a burden he was willing to lift. I trusted him. I shouldn't have. At first, it felt harmless. I gave him my paycheck every Friday, and he gave me a little card for groceries and gas. "Anything else, just tell me," he said. I took it as care, structure, a team effort. The candle was the first red flag, a cheap lavender candle I picked up after a long shift. He held the receipt like it was evidence. "You didn't tell me about this," he said quietly, almost disappointed. I tried to laugh it off. "It's just a candle." He didn't laugh. "I need you to communicate, okay? I can't manage money if you're out buying extras." After that, I started sending him photos before I bought anything. Shampoo, a clearance shirt, a burger on my lunch break. Most times he said fine, but when he didn't, I felt guilty for even asking. He monitored my hours too. "How many did you get this week? Why so few? Did you ask for more?" If my check was smaller than he expected, he'd go quiet for the rest of the night, scrolling on his phone, sighing like I'd personally failed him. Friends invited me out, but I turned them down. Not because I didn't want to go, but because asking him for money felt like stepping onto a trap. The disappointment, the comments, the reminders about being on a budget. It was easier to stay home. Meanwhile, I picked up more around the house. Cooking, laundry, dishes, cleaning. Anything to keep him from making those small, sharp remarks about falling behind. He never yelled, never slammed doors. He didn't have to. His silence was worse. The day of the coffee incident, I texted him, "Hey, card declined. Everything okay?" 2 hours later, he replied, "Had to move some money. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I worried as I bagged bread under fluorescent lights, thinking about how I worked every day, but felt broke in a way that didn't make sense. When I got home, he was on the couch with a pizza box and a brand new pair of sneakers by the door. Nicer than anything he'd bought in years. "Nice shoes," I said. "Needed them for work," he answered, not looking up. I stared at those shoes, at the pizza, at the man who held every dollar I earned while telling me we were tight. I opened my mouth to ask where my money was going. He muted the TV and looked at me with that irritated patience I'd come to dread. "Don't start," he said. "I'm handling everything. You need to trust me." I stood there in my stained work shoes, feeling small and stupid in my own house. And for the first time, a thought formed clearly. If he's handling everything, why do I feel like I have nothing at all? The fear didn't hit me yet, but the doubt did, heavy and cold. And it was only the beginning. Things didn't explode all at once. That would have been easier, honestly. Instead, everything slid downhill in these slow, quiet steps until I couldn't tell where normal ended and wrong began. It started with the power bill. I came home one afternoon, opened the door, and saw the microwave clock blinking like it does after an outage. I figured it was a quick neighborhood flicker, until I found the notice stuck in the door. "Past due. Final warning." My name and marks printed in bold. My stomach dropped. We'd had 2 paychecks, decent ones. There was no reason for a final anything. Inside, Mark was on the couch scrolling on his phone. "What's this?" I asked, showing him the notice. He barely looked. "They messed something up again. I already called. Relax." But the next week, the lights actually went out. No fan, no fridge hum, no TV, just stale heat and silence. I used my phone's flashlight to find him outside on the porch, smoking. "They shut it off," I said. He took a drag like I'd interrupted something. "I told you we're behind. I'm handling it. They'll turn it back on tomorrow." "We had the money," I said. "Where did it go?" He finally looked at me, annoyed. "You know what gas costs? You know how much I put into my truck? You think everything runs on your tiny part-time check?" The words stung more than the heat. I backed off, told myself he was stressed, tried to believe him, but the pattern kept repeating. Late water bill, late internet, rent notice taped to the door. Always a story, always a reason, always a shift of blame. Meanwhile, little clues piled up. Scratch-off lottery tickets in his glove compartment, crumpled bar tabs in his pockets, new fishing rods in the shed. When I asked about any of it, he gave me the same line. "This is why I didn't want you stressing. Let me handle things." My world shrank. Wanting $5 for a drink with friends became selfish. Wishing for new shoes became irresponsible. Mentioning exhaustion became, "You don't know what real work is." If the floor wasn't swept, he'd ask, "What did you do all afternoon?" If dinner wasn't ready, he'd sigh loudly, stand in the kitchen doorway, and mutter, "Every damn day." He never hit me. He didn't have to. His voice, his blame, his silence, those were enough to keep me small. Every night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan that barely turned, feeling this pressure in my chest like the air itself was too heavy. I'd hear his truck pulling up and immediately scan the house. Dishes, laundry, trash, before he stepped inside. The worst part was the shame. I felt stupid for not understanding bills. Stupid for working so hard and still being broke. Stupid for thinking his frustrations were my fault. That shame almost kept me trapped forever. Almost. The turning point came from someone who didn't even know the half of it. My mom. I visited her on a Sunday, brought her leftover cookies from the bakery, and tried to act normal. "Honey," she said carefully, "I didn't want to scare you, but someone called my place last week. Said your name was on a store card that's past due." I felt something twist in my stomach. "I don't have a store card." She handed me a letter from a drawer. There it was. My name, my social, my account, my missed payments. The store address said it all. The furniture place on Route 9. The same one where Mark insisted on getting a deal on a couch and mattress last year. The same day he told me they didn't need my ID. My hands went numb. I thanked my mom, tucked the letter into my purse, and sat on the bus home, feeling like my body was floating somewhere behind me. I spent that whole ride scrolling through my email. And there it was, buried in a junk folder, another notice about my account. When I walked through our front door, Mark was on the couch, feet up, TV blasting. On the very couch I now knew was in my name. "Did you open a card in my name?" I asked. He flinched, just slightly, then frowned. "Why are you coming at me like that? Did you use my name?" My voice cracked. He paused the TV slowly. "They needed someone with cleaner credit. It's our house, our stuff. Don't be dramatic." "You never asked me." "They'd just upset you. I said I'd handle it." I looked at the couch, the bills on the counter, him lounging like none of it mattered. And something inside me, finally, cleanly, snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just went silent, but not the afraid kind. The kind you hear right before a storm shifts direction. I walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in my lap. For the first time, I named it. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was using me. And he wasn't going to stop. Not unless I made him. I didn't confront him again. I didn't slam doors or demand answers. I just shifted into a quiet mode he didn't notice, the kind of quiet where you stop trying to fix things and start preparing to leave them behind. My first step was the simplest. I stopped giving him my paycheck. On my lunch break, I walked to the little credit union next to the supermarket. The lobby smelled like printer ink and peppermint gum. A woman at the desk asked if I wanted a joint account, and the laugh that almost escaped me felt sharp enough to cut something. "No," I said. "Just mine." I changed my direct deposit. I set my statements to paperless, and I memorized the login details like a prayer. Then, I waited. 2 weeks until the next payday. 2 weeks of pretending nothing had changed. At home, I played the same role I had for months, cooking, cleaning, listening to his complaints about money being tight. But now, when he asked about my hours, I answered with vague phrases. "I'll check." "Not sure yet." They moved the schedule around. He didn't notice a thing. He was too used to me explaining myself, too used to assuming he had access to every part of my life. My second step was harder. I dug for evidence. I went through drawers, boxes, his truck's glove compartment, anywhere paperwork might end up when he got lazy. I found late notices shoved between old takeout menus, collection letters under a pile of tools, and a thick envelope from the furniture store with my name on it. Most painful was a small loan contract with my signature, except it wasn't mine. He'd tried to copy it, but he always made his R a little too tall. Seeing it in print made my hands go cold. I took everything to the library and scanned it into PDFs, one after another. I emailed them to a new address he didn't know existed. Then I put the originals into a folder labeled Old Work Stuff and buried it in my baking textbooks. My third step was the most important. I pulled my credit reports. 3 thick packets of numbers and accounts and dates. I sat at the library table with a pen and circled every line that wasn't mine. 4 accounts I never opened. A small loan, a department store card, a late payment on something I'd never heard of. Every piece pointed to the same person, the man eating pizza on my couch every night, the man who told me not to stress, the man who said he handled everything. Once I knew the scope of the damage, the rest snapped into place. I made calls. I asked questions. I learned phrases like fraudulent account, signature discrepancy, and identity misuse. One customer service rep said gently, "If you didn't open these, you're going to need a police report." Her tone was careful, not dramatic. I think she knew exactly what I was dealing with. On the day my paycheck finally hit the new account, I took the morning off and packed a small bag, just clothes, essentials, and the folder of documents. I hid it in my trunk under a blanket. Then I drove across town to the diner where my mom works. She took one look at me and said, "Let's get a booth." I didn't sugarcoat anything this time. I told her about the money disappearing, the bills, the forged accounts, all of it. She didn't look shocked, just sad, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Honey," she said softly, "this isn't a mistake. This is control." With her by my side, I froze my credit and filed fraud alerts. Then we went to the police station. I handed over copies of every forged document. The officer flipped through them silently, page after page. At the loan form, he exhaled. "This is clear-cut fraud," he said. "You're doing the right thing." He wrote up the report, gave me a case number, and told me what would happen next. I walked out of that station feeling something I hadn't felt in months, my spine. But I had one more step, the one I owed myself. That evening, I drove home one last time. Mark was in the living room, socks on the coffee table, TV blaring. I stood in the doorway and said, "I'm leaving." He didn't even look away from the screen. "Leaving what?" "Here," I said. "You, everything." He paused the TV, annoyed. "Don't start. What's your problem now?" Instead of answering, I set the folder of papers neatly on the coffee table, forged signatures on top. He grabbed one page, scanned it, and his face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "I know what you did," I said quietly. He opened his mouth, ready to twist everything into another excuse. I didn't stay to hear it. I walked out, got into my car, and closed the door on his voice, his house, his rules. For the first time in a year, the air felt breathable. I expected him to blow up my phone. I expected rage, insults, begging, something. But the first message he sent after I left wasn't even a full sentence. "Where are you?" Then, "When are you coming back?" Then, "You're making a mistake." I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because explaining myself to him was the root of everything I'd lost, and I wasn't doing it anymore. By the next morning, the tone changed. "Rent is due. I need your check." As if I'd just forgotten. As if the world still ran on his schedule. I blocked him. Simple as closing a window. I stayed with my mom for the first week. Her place was small, cluttered in a cozy way, with old diner mugs lining the counter. I slept on the pull-out couch, with our dog curled against my legs like he'd been holding his breath too. For the first time in years, mornings felt quiet instead of tense. No footsteps pacing, no sighs from the kitchen, no man watching every move to make sure I didn't mess up the budget. While I settled in, the fallout began. The police followed up on my report. The detective asked for a formal statement, and when I handed him the folder again, neatly organized, labeled, copies highlighted, he nodded in approval. "You've done a lot of the work already," he said. It didn't feel like work. It felt like taking back pieces of myself one page at a time. 2 of the fraudulent accounts closed immediately once the investigation started. The furniture store forwarded their contract to the police as confirmation of forgery. The loan company froze the collection process, pending charges. Every call I made, every update I received, untangled another knot that had been twisting inside me. Mark, meanwhile, was unraveling without me. He tried calling from different numbers, blocked. He tried messaging through friends, ignored. Then he started contacting my manager at the bakery, telling them I misplaced important mail and could be confused. They brushed it off. They'd seen me dragging myself through shifts for months. They knew the difference between confusion and fear. The detectives eventually reached out to him. That was the turning point. He tried to play dumb. They told me that later, said he had no idea how those accounts ended up in my name. But when asked why he never reported the supposed identity theft himself, he had no answer. A week later, I received a formal notice. Charges recommended for financial fraud and identity misuse. I didn't smile when I read it. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed out slowly, like someone finally loosening a band that had been wrapped around my chest. Revenge didn't feel dramatic. It felt fair. Quiet, clean fairness. About a month after I left, I returned to the rental house with my mom to collect the rest of my things. The landlord met us there. "Good timing," he said, unlocking the door. "He's being evicted next week." Inside, the place looked smaller, messier, lonely in a way it never felt when I lived there. My baking pans were still in the cabinet. My apron was still hanging on the hook, but none of it felt like mine anymore. Mark wasn't home. The landlord made sure of that. But there was a note on the table, folded sharply. I almost didn't read it. Curiosity won. It said, "You ruined my life. Hope you're happy." I folded it back and set it exactly where I found it. His life wasn't ruined. It was simply no longer built out of my paychecks, my credit, my silence. I packed my boxes, loaded the car, locked the door, and left without looking back. The real closure came later, in ways I didn't expect. Like the first payday that hit my new account. Full, untouched. Like buying myself a coffee without checking my balance. Like waking up without immediately bracing for the sound of anger disguised as disappointment. I found a small studio apartment not far from my job. Nothing fancy, peeling paint, loud neighbors, old radiator, but every bill was in my name, paid with my money, and that made it feel like a mansion. I picked up more hours at the bakery by choice, not pressure. I started seeing friends again. I even bought myself a little lavender candle, the same kind that started everything, and lit it the day I moved in. The flame was small, soft, steady, kind of like me, now that I finally had the space to breathe. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be fiery or loud. Sometimes it's just telling the truth when someone spent years convincing you not to. Sometimes it's walking away and letting the consequences find the person who earned them. And sometimes it's as simple as taking back a life that always should have been yours.